network was concerned, they got 5 years out of it,
Yeah.
which they reached the magic number, and that's all they really care about.
I don't know where it is showing in syndication now, and I imagine that would be a...
I'm sure it's being shown somewhere.
I'm sure it is.
Has to be.
And they did get, eventually they did get to go to some of the heavier storylines, which is exactly what I think one of the reasons Valerie wanted some changes with the show.
Yeah.
They did not. And I can understand that point because you have the threat of becoming just another mundane family sitcom. And they wanted to kind of push that. And considering the 1980s, there were a lot of topics you could have gone into, which some shows went feet first and some shows avoided. And that was, choices that they wanted to make. I mean, we're talking, look at the time that we're talking. Mr. Belvedere did an AIDS episode, I think, before anybody else. And
Different Strokes did an episode about pedophilia.
Yeah, did what? Yeah, so there were some, and these shows were being recognized and praised, and so I think that was also part of it. But if we go back to Sandy Duncan, I think she has been working nonstop, whether it's been on stage or it's on screen. Yeah, and a very important part of television history.
ChildofTelevision.blogspot.com, childofTelevision.blogspot.com, also StorySalon.com or Facebook.com/StorySalon. Donna's new book, by the way, is called Fall Again, Beginnings. It's a romantic novel that asks the question, what would you do if you met the perfect person, only it was not the perfect time? For more information, go to fallagainseries.com. Tony will stay with us for our next segment as we continue our look back at the original Dragnet and the legacy of Jack Webb. Emmy Award winner Joseph Doherty will join us. We hope you'll join us when we come back on TV Confidential.
Does your office need a good cleaning? That extra touch? Well, try the best. Whether your office is small or large, V&A Enterprises have what you need. You get quality cleaning with V&A Enterprises Cleaning Company, a Jenna King franchise owner. Call 1-248-936-0046. That's 1-248-936-0046 today.
Hi, Rita. How are you?
Fine. Oh,
What's wrong?
stressed neck and shoulders.
Sounds like you can use a good massage.
Sounds like another appointment, Felicia, I don't have time for.
I know just the place. No appointment needed. It's $1 a minute. You can get as much or as little time as you like.
Can I go right now?
I don't see why not. They're open 7 days a week from 10 to 8.
Really? Girl, where?
Downtown Ann Arbor, 300 Huron. And yes, they do have free parking.
After a 30-minute massage.
Rita, you look better.
Look better, honey. I feel like singing the relaxation. Oh, shabba-dabba-doo, shoo-ba-ba-wa-wee-da-bo-bo-bo.
Hi, this is Anson Williams, and you're listening to the amazing TV Confidential.
1 out of 12, a 415 man with a gun. 1 out of 12, no warrant. Lincoln X-ray, item 483. 1 out of 12, a 415 fight group with chains and knives.
Ed Robertson and Tony Figueroa, along with our guests Joseph Doherty and Dan Farron, as we take a fresh look at the original Dragnet, the iconic TV series created by Jack Webb that essentially created the genre of the police procedural. Joe recently rediscovered the original Dragnet series on radio, and that in turn led him back to the original Dragnet TV series from the early 1950s. We are comparing the original Dragnet with the revival series from the 1960s, as well as discussing the career of Jack Webb in general. Joseph Doherty is one of the writers, producers, and directors of Pretty Little Liars. New episodes of Pretty Little Liars air on Tuesday nights on ABC Family. Dan Farron is one of the producers of Story Salon. If you're just joining us, this is the second part of a two-part conversation. Part one aired on our previous program, show number 305, which is available on our archives page. Among other things, we discussed the reasons why Dragnet is often looked down upon today, when it in fact provided a blueprint for the modern-day police procedural. As we pick up the conversation, we were talking about how some of Jack Webb's other shows are viewed today, including Adam 12.
One of the reasons that What Adam 12 and an Emergency don't suffer from the attitude issue so much, although it's been a long time since I've seen an Adam 12, is because there is this conscious decision. I mean, I remember like Adam 12 was a rough sell because there was no completeness.
Right.
Yeah.
It was just you were just going to be with the patrolman, and when the patrolman handed off the case, that's the last you'd hear about it.
And a lot, I think more in the 60s, there a lot of times you did not see what happened. You know, they get the call, and then you see Joe Friday and Bill Gannon come in, and the uniforms leave.
Yeah, they hand off.
So you never saw any of the. You're there for the aftermath, which could be covered with a sheet at that time. And so Adam 12 would be almost like the inverse of that.
And what I remember about Adam 12 is that at least towards the middle to end of the show, which is when I probably would have remembered first started watching it, is that the tone for a typical episode might vary because a typical patrolman's day might vary. I mean, you might get the call to go to a disturbance of the peace at 6th and Figueroa, or you might get the call because someone is streaking in the middle of Hollywood Boulevard, and you have to take care, which is sort of a little maybe off the wall the way they might portray it.
And you mix them in an episode.
Yeah, and so you would go from somewhat serious in the first act to something off the wall in the second act. And I think Emergency had a mix, had that mix as well. Following at least the paramedics part.
The thing about Emergency, and I think I actually know somebody who worked on it, and that's cool. Because basically what it is I think like Emergency basically took everything they knew from What Adam 12 and then perfected it further, which was it has to have this core relationship of someone who's a little more senior and someone who's a little more green. And what Emergency did was it opened up their world by staying in the firehouse.
Yeah.
So you're still dealing with a tight group of men who knew each other. And the hospital, actually the fire department stuff was always more interesting because the doctor stuff kind of looked like doctor stuff that you would see on another show, except for Julie London.
Former Mrs. Jack Webb,
who was working with her present husband,
Bobby Troop,
who used to be on Dragnet,
who wrote Route 66, which starred Martin Milner, and then we get Kevin.
It all comes together.
It all comes together. Now, before we started recording and going back to the original Dragnet, Joe, you were talking about one of your and Beverly's favorite episodes of the original Dragnet.
There's one that stars a radio show, which we then found on this public. I guess we won't name names, but there are a lot of public domain compilation discs, and there's a pretty good one that is very large and has lots of discs in it, and has 25 Dragnets on it, which is probably and they're all prime. But it's about staking out on a hotel. And it's the second half of it is basically Joe Friday and
Ben Alexander.
It's Ben Alexander,
great actor,
being themselves. But again, there's an awareness here. My wife Beverly, insists you can see Jack Webb crack up because it's them dealing with the world's most drunk hotel clerk, played by a Stan Freberg actor, Phil Leeds. And as I say, I refer to it as it's the only episode of Dragnet ever written by Samuel Beckett. It's just like basically it's like they never get a straight answer from the guy, but it is so surreal because you've never seen. It's the only place where I know it's things like it's like Phil Leeds is really drunk and he's talking about the hotel he's staying in. And he says, "Well, this is one of Claude's places." And Jack says, "How many does he have?" "Only one. This is one of his places." What the hell is going on? And it's just like. It's almost there's an awareness of the fact that basically they're trying to have one show, and Phil Leeds is off somewhere else, and again it's like you watch this like what did Jack Webb like? He must have loved this stuff. The story he did more than once.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure if he made it as a TV show, if he did it as a radio show and he didn't like it, he wasn't going to remake it on TV. But there is. And you don't notice it right away. because of craft, this goes back to the discussion of craft level, you don't notice how densely written the shows are. They are very densely written. The exposition comes at you a mile a minute, but you don't know you're getting it.
I think I read the script for the 2-hour Dragnet, essentially the pilot for Dragnet 67.
Mm-hmm.
It was a 2-hour movie, so it's 100 minutes broadcast. I read somewhere the script was 190 pages.
Wow,
it's a lot. I can understand that. That's in keeping with what people used to say scripts for ER looked like.
Yeah.
He said there's a tremendous amount of stuff and you have to do it very fast.
Yeah.
And there was that attempt several years ago to do Dragnet with Ed O'Neill, and the thing was they didn't do anything like Dragnet. They couldn't do it.
I don't know.
Dick Wolf.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. I don't think you can do it.
No, I don't think you can without it.
There was also a version in the late 80s.
That was done for syndication.
Yeah, for syndication, where they did the new Dragnet and the new Adam 12.
Yeah.
They took nothing.
They took the name, but beyond that, any similarities were
the Ed O'Neill version, it was Joe Friday, and he did have a partner, Frank Smith.
We're taking a look at the original Dragnet and the career of Jack Webb in general, along with Joseph Doherty and Dan Farron. Joe recently rediscovered the original Dragnet series on radio, as well as the original TV series from the 1950s, the show that created the genre of the police procedural. Joseph Doherty is one of the writers, producers, and directors of Pretty Little Liars, which recently returned to ABC Family. Dan Farron is one of the producers of Story Salon. We should talk a little bit about the Frank Smith characters. Now, and again, we don't really know the answers to these questions, but he created. Well, now Frank Smith was not the original partner.
He was the second guy, and there was some intermediate. The first fellow was Ben. The character's name, I think, was Ben Romano.
Romano or Romero was played by Barton Yarborough. He was on the radio show, and then
and it was a distinctive voice you would never use on the radio because it didn't sound like an actor.
Yeah. And Yarborough died shortly after the television show started production.
And Barney Phillips did it for a couple of episodes, and somebody else did it.
And Herb Ellis did it for a couple, and then they finally settled on Frank Smith, played by Ben Alexander.
And I think what happens is Ben Alexander is the moment where the chemistry between two distinctive personalities shows up.
And that's the key. I mean, he made, as I understand, Barney Smith. He looked too much like Webb in real life, so that didn't work on television. So but he ends up doing like a half a dozen of the things anyway. He did. Because you work once for Jack, you had a job for life.
Yeah.
But because Webb essentially wrote or oversaw the writing, and he directed every show, and so he basically his stamp was all over the place. Whether the Frank Smith character could be considered an extension of his personality that he wasn't able to convey in Joe Friday, I don't know. But it's like, at least it goes back to the question: where is the jazz-loving Jack Webb?
I don't see him. I mean, Ben Alexander. Basically, all of a sudden there is this. He's the family man. Although all the partners are married, and many of the partners have children. Joe is single. His mother actually plays in the radio show sometimes.
And he did have a fiancée at one point in one of the shows.
Nobody remembers that part. But it's like, but the Ben Alexander is like there's where some humor starts to come in, and I think it was just to put it in relief for the Jack. And I think what Harry Morgan did
was much the same thing.
It was much the same thing. Morgan was probably a little broader.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like it's to Harry Morgan's credit, because I mean, I haven't heard interviews of Harry Morgan, but I've heard people talk about how it made him crazy to play it so straight. It would drive him nuts.
Oh, look at his performances on MASH after.
Yeah.
I mean,
he would do things like I said, this okay, all right. I actually know where the story comes from. This is an interview with Alan Alda, telling something that Harry Morgan told him about Jack Webb was that they made the damn things in 3 days. And he said that one day Harry Morgan came in on the set and he told a joke, and the crew laughed. And Jack said, "Stop it! What are you talking about?"